This is the Caribbean. One of the most recognizable regions in the world. It's associated with beaches, tourism, and celebration, especially events like Carnival. But behind that vivid imagery is a far more complex history. A history shaped by colonization, migration, and cultural exchange. The history of the Caribbean and its people are often misunderstood, or worse, overlooked. This is the story of the Indo-Caribbeans. For centuries, the Caribbean had been shaped by plantation economies. Crops like sugar, cocoa, and tobacco were produced at scale for export, creating immense wealth for European empires. Millions of Africans were forcibly brought to the region and enslaved, forming the foundation of Caribbean society as it developed. In 1834, slavery was abolished across the British Empire. But while the system of slavery ended, the plantation economy remained. The demand for labor didn't disappear, it only shifted.
Indians are one of the most dispersed groups on this planet. And have you ever stopped to think why Indians are found in these far-flung places?
In the early 19th century, Britain was the most powerful nation on earth. Her colonies stretched from the Caribbean to the South Pacific. But there is a lost chapter to that imperial history. The story of over 1 million people who were secretly enslaved and transported to the farthest shores of the British Empire. Shipped under agreements that they could neither read nor understand, they didn't know where they were going, and most of them never made it home. Yet what was one of the largest movements of people in the 19th century has now been almost completely forgotten.
Recruiting agents began appearing in villages across India, offering steady work, housing, medical care, and return passage after a 5-year contract. For many individuals facing poverty, it seemed like a rare opportunity. But the recruitment process was often deceptive. Agents, known as archival, frequently misrepresented the terms of contracts and the conditions awaiting workers. Many recruits were illiterate and unable to read the agreements they were signing. Some believed they were traveling to nearby regions such as Sri Lanka, only to discover that they had been sent across the ocean to an entirely different world.
As soon as they signed that contract, the indentured worker lost much of their freedom. They were treated like human cargo, shipped around the world and bound to their employer for the time period of their contract.
There were more than 3 million people taken from India crossing the Kalapani, the Blackwater, to other British colonies, effectively replacing 25% of the Atlantic slave trade. A lot of the Indians brought to North and South America ended up in Trinidad, British Guyana, and Suriname.
So from India, people were taken to Mauritius, to Trinidad, to Guyana, to Fiji, to St. Lucia, Grenada, South Africa, Malaysia. The system was huge, so over 2 million people were part of it. And it has left, obviously, a huge diaspora because the majority of people didn't return in those places. They are a remarkable people because the story of indenture is a story of against all odds survival.
What survived wasn't just people. The British had brought them here for labor. But instead, they got culture, music, food, religion, and so much more.
Today, people of Indian descent make up a significant portion of the population, and their influence is deeply woven into daily life. This is visible in religion, with Hinduism and Islam practiced alongside Christianity and in national celebrations such as Diwali, which is officially recognized as a public holiday. It is not unusual for people of different faiths to attend each other's celebrations, creating a sense of cultural exchange rather than separation. This blending of traditions reflects the country's diverse population, shaped by African, Indian, European, and Middle Eastern influences over time. The cultural impact also extends to food, music, and language, where Indian traditions have blended with African and European elements to create something entirely unique. Dishes like curry and roti are staples, while musical styles such as chutney reflect this fusion.
So if I think Indo-Caribbean, I think tassa, chutney artists, roti, doubles, dal, rice, kuchla, 7 curries, chana and aloo, pumpkin, spinach.
Tassa drumming began as an Indian tradition, but in the Caribbean it evolved. It got faster, it got louder, more rhythmic, as it was shaped by the Afro beats. The influences of music, food, and religion didn't just shape everyday life. Over time, they moved outward, from private into public spaces, and nowhere is that more visible than in Carnival. In places like Trinidad and Tobago, Carnival is one of the most recognizable cultural events in the world. What began as a European pre-Lenten festival was taken back after emancipation, transformed by formerly enslaved populations into a public expression of freedom and rebellion.
The enslaved people began holding their own celebrations in secret. They took the idea of the masquerade and mixed it with their own African traditions. Their drumming, their dances, their storytelling, their folklore. They used their masters' thrown-away clothes to make costumes and turned those costumes into something that mocked the very people who enslaved them. They called this celebration canboulé, from the French words for burnt cane, a reference to the sugarcane fields where they were forced to work.
Today, Carnival reflects a full layering of Caribbean culture, shaped by African, Indian, and European influences. What began as displacement became something lasting. The Caribbean is not just a place, it's a result of many journeys. And Indo-Caribbean identity is one of them.
We go jump till the moon come down. As we start shine on. Play a mass and break away. Freedom in we DNA.
You know how that happened, right? You know how he's just as Indian as we are, but his forefathers, unlike my forefathers, his forefathers were not fast runners. You see, my forefathers saw the ships coming into the harbor and we went, I'm not getting on that boat. And his forefathers went, hey, look, a boat. They ended up in South Africa. Why am I cutting sugar cane? I'm diabetic.
Actually Indian by way of Trinidad, y'all. Hey, okay. I appreciate the support. The rest of y'all, like, we don't talk to y'all slaves. Y'all do know that's how a bunch of Indian people ended up in the Caribbean, right? We weren't on like a Royal Caribbean, cruise. Indian people get excited about Independence Day. I'm like, at least y'all got to work from home. They took us all the way. they took us. We had to go in 5 days a week. Y'all got to sit home. We didn't have that option.